I asked if this was a mistake, but the way she looked at me, like she already knew the answer, made the world go quiet. It began in the most ordinary way, the kind of evening that should have passed without leaving a trace. A soft drizzle blurred the windows of the small cafe, warm light spilling onto the wet pavement like a quiet invitation. The kind of night meant for light conversation and easy laughter. But something shifted the moment she walked in. She didn't make an entrance that demanded attention. She didn't have to. She carried herself with a calm that pulled the air toward her, shoulders relaxed, hair tucked behind one ear, eyes scanning the room with quiet curiosity. There was a kind of grace to her presence. Not loud. Just steady. We were both there for the same reason, a friends' casual gathering, the kind that usually ended with everyone laughing over too many half-finished cups of coffee. She sat across the table, not directly in front of me, but close enough for her voice to thread through the noise whenever she spoke. It wasn't just her words. It was how she spoke them. Slowly. Thoughtfully. Like everything she said had weight. As conversation splintered into smaller groups, she turned to me. It started with something simple, a shared comment about the music playing in the background. One line. One smile. But it opened a quiet door neither of us seemed in a rush to close. Her eyes held mine longer than a stranger's should. Not in a way that made me nervous, in a way that made the world shrink just a little. The way someone looks at you when they're really listening, when they're not just waiting to talk. Her fingers rested lightly on the edge of her cup. She didn't fidget, didn't force small talk. There was a stillness about her that made me want to lean closer, to catch every subtle shift in her expression. When she laughed, it wasn't loud, it rolled softly, warm enough to settle into the air between us. Then it happened, one of those small, meaningless accidents that doesn't stay meaningless. Our hands brushed as we both reached for the sugar. Just the side of her knuckles against mine, soft, almost tentative. And yet, it was enough to send a warm shiver crawling up my arm. For a second, neither of us moved. Her skin was warm, not from the cup she held, but from her. I pulled back, just enough to be polite. She didn't apologize. She just smiled, small and knowing, like she felt it too. That's when I realized I was holding my breath. I reminded myself, she was older, beautiful in a way that felt a little out of reach. The kind of woman who'd lived enough life to wear confidence like second skin. Me? I was just a man sitting across a table, trying not to get lost in a pair of eyes that felt like they could see straight through me. But some silences are louder than words. The cafe chatter faded to a distant hum, the rain tapping softly against the windows. And in that quiet pocket of time, her gaze lingered. Warm. Unhurried. Dangerous in the gentlest way. I told myself it was just a conversation. But somewhere beneath the steady rhythm of the rain, something had already shifted. It started with little things. Texts that weren't meant to mean anything. Just links to songs, jokes that only we would find funny, soft words exchanged late at night when neither of us could sleep. We never said we were waiting for each other's messages, but somehow, the silence between them began to feel heavier than the words themselves. We began to meet outside the group. It wasn't planned. One day it was just coffee before work. The next, a walk after sunset. Every time I told myself it was nothing. Every time it felt like a little more. One afternoon, the sky shifted, a soft drizzle, like the night we met. She stood beneath the awning outside the cafe, her hair loosely tied back, strands falling over her cheeks as the wind brushed past. She laughed when she saw me running toward her, slightly out of breath, holding the umbrella like some kind of misplaced gentleman. We shared it without thinking. Our shoulders almost touching, steps falling in rhythm. At first, it was easy to talk, work, memories, music. Then, slowly, the words grew softer. Less about the world, more about the small corners of our lives we didn't show to just anyone. Her perfume mixed with the smell of rain, warm vanilla wrapped in petrichor. Her hand brushed mine once, then again. Not by accident this time. Just lightly. Testing the space between us. She reached out at one point, laughing softly as she brushed a raindrop from my hair. Her fingertips lingered a heartbeat too long. Not long enough to be bold. Just enough to burn itself into my memory. And I didn't step back. The umbrella tilted slightly as we walked. We were close now, close enough that her coat brushed against my arm every time she breathed in. The world around us dimmed, traffic fading into a distant hum. I couldn't tell if it was the rain or her presence that made everything feel warmer. We ended up at her car. The windshield was fogged with the soft mist of rain, streetlights glimmering through the blur. Neither of us moved to say goodbye at first. It wasn't awkward, it was quiet. Like both of us knew this moment mattered more than we wanted to admit. She leaned against the car door, arms crossed loosely, her eyes meeting mine with that same unhurried calm she'd had the night we met. But beneath it was something new, something softer, less guarded. "Thanks," she said, voice low, almost a whisper against the rain. I nodded. Words felt unnecessary. For a moment, the world held its breath. Her eyes dropped to my lips, just for a second, then back up again. It was subtle. But enough to make my pulse stumble. She opened the car door but didn't get in. "Good night," she said, still standing there, like part of her didn't want the night to end either. "Good night," I echoed. She gave me a small smile, not the polite kind, but the kind that left an ache behind. Then she slipped into her car, turned the key, and drove off into the rain. I stood there longer than I should have, the sound of the rain filling the empty space she left behind. I told myself it was just a friendship. But the way her fingers had brushed my hair, the way she'd looked at me before leaving, it didn't feel like friendship at all. And that was the first quiet step across a line neither of us had drawn. It was late evening when I found myself walking back to the same cafe where we'd met. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the air still held that damp sweetness that comes after a storm. Light from the windows spilled onto the pavement in warm, golden pools. I hadn't planned to see her tonight. But something in me knew I wanted to. Or maybe, needed to. She was already there, sitting by the corner window. Her back was straight, a soft halo of light catching the loose strands of her hair. She wasn't dressed up, just a simple coat, a scarf loosely knotted around her neck. Yet there was something about the way she sat there that made the world quiet around her. When she saw me, her lips curved upward, not a wide smile, but one that felt personal. Private. I slid into the seat across from her. For a while, neither of us spoke. The hum of soft music filled the gaps. A couple at the far end laughed quietly. Someone clinked a spoon against a cup. But between us, there was just a slow, steady silence, the kind that doesn't demand words to make sense. She tilted her head slightly, studying me with that calm, unguarded gaze of hers. "You look like you've been carrying something," she said softly. Her voice wasn't pressing for answers. It was an invitation. I exhaled slowly, fingers wrapped around my cup for warmth. "I don't know what this is," I admitted quietly. "But it's starting to feel like something I can't ignore anymore." Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in a little, resting her chin on her hand, her expression unreadable but warm. "I didn't mean for it to be anything," I continued, the words trembling at the edges. "I just like being around you. Maybe more than I should." She let the silence sit for a moment. Then, slowly, she reached across the table. Her fingertips brushed against the back of my hand. Just the lightest touch, soft, warm, steady. The kind of touch that doesn't ask for permission but gives you the choice to pull away if you need to. I didn't. Her thumb moved gently, tracing an invisible circle over my knuckles. I felt it deep in my chest, that quiet warmth unfurling like something dangerous and beautiful at once. She looked down at our hands, then back up at me. "You're not the only one," she whispered. Something inside me stilled. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. But in her eyes, I saw the reflection of everything I'd been trying to keep quiet, the unspoken pull, the soft ache of wanting something you're afraid to reach for. Outside, the streetlights flickered against the wet pavement. Inside, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. She didn't let go of my hand. She didn't rush to define it either. She just held on, like she was allowing herself, maybe for the first time, to stop running from the way it felt. "I don't know where this leads," she said softly, eyes steady on mine. "But I can't pretend I don't feel it too." Her hand was still over mine. Warm. Certain. My heartbeat echoed against my skin. And just like that, the space between us shifted, no longer uncertain, but quietly honest. For a while after that night, everything felt different. Not louder. Not brighter. Just, heavier. Like the air between us had gained a quiet kind of weight. We still met, short walks after work, unplanned coffee runs, stolen minutes that stretched longer than they should. But beneath the laughter, beneath the small touches and shared glances, something else had begun to take shape. A shadow that neither of us could ignore anymore. It wasn't the feeling itself that scared me. It was what came after. The whispers, the questions, the things people don't say out loud but always think. I was younger. She was older. And the world rarely leaves such things alone. That evening, the sky matched the storm inside my chest, a dull gray, low clouds pressing down, threatening rain. I found her sitting at our usual corner table in the cafe. Her posture was composed, but her eyes were different tonight. Distant. Guarded. I hesitated at the door for a moment, watching her trace the rim of her cup with one finger. That small, distracted motion told me more than words ever could. When I finally sat down, she looked up, her smile small and fragile, like it wasn't sure it belonged. "You've been quiet lately," I said softly. She let out a slow breath. "So have you." Her voice wasn't cold. It was careful. Measured. The kind of tone people use when they're trying not to break something delicate. The silence between us stretched long and thin. Rain began to tap against the windows. Not a downpour, just a steady, soft rhythm that made every breath feel louder. She wrapped her hands around her cup, but I could see the tremor in her fingers. It wasn't fear of me. It was fear of everything around us. This thing between us. She paused, swallowing the rest of her sentence. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, and for a heartbeat, the vulnerability there almost undid me. "It scares me." I reached across the table, hesitating only a second before letting my hand cover hers. Her skin was warm, but her fingers were tense beneath my touch. "What are you scared of?" I asked quietly. Her lips parted, but it took a long moment for the words to find their way out. "Not you," she whispered. "The world. What people will say. What it'll cost. I've been through enough to know that feelings aren't always enough to make things easy." My thumb brushed against the side of her hand, slow and steady. "I know," I said. And I did. I'd thought the same things, over and over, in the spaces between our moments. She didn't pull her hand away. But she didn't relax either. We just sat there, caught in a storm that neither of us had invited but both of us had felt coming. Her eyes softened then, just barely, as if part of her hated the distance fear had built between us. "Maybe," she whispered, "maybe we should stop before it's too late." The words fell gently, but they hit like rain on cold skin. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I tightened my hold on her hand just slightly. Enough to say, "I hear you. I don't want to let go." And in that quiet, trembling moment, she didn't move away. Outside, the rain picked up, streaking down the glass. Inside, it felt like we were standing on opposite sides of an invisible line, one that neither of us wanted to cross, yet neither of us could walk away from. The silence between us had grown louder than any words could have. Days had stretched out unevenly, short in moments I saw her, endless in the ones I didn't. Our conversations had become softer, slower, like both of us were standing at the edge of something neither of us was brave enough to name. That night, I couldn't pretend anymore. The city was quiet, wrapped in a thin veil of fog. The kind of night where everything felt slower, like the world itself was holding its breath. I knew where she would be. It wasn't a guess. It was a certainty born from the rhythm we'd fallen into without ever talking about it. Her balcony overlooked the city, a stretch of distant lights blinking beneath a heavy sky. She stood there alone, wrapped in a soft sweater, her hair loose and unguarded. The breeze lifted the ends of it gently, like the night itself couldn't help but touch her. When she turned and saw me, she didn't look surprised. She didn't ask why I was there. She just let out a breath, soft and almost relieved. I stepped forward until I was standing beside her. Neither of us spoke at first. The cold brushed against my skin, but the air around her felt warm. Familiar. Her gaze stayed fixed on the lights below. I could see the reflection of the city in her eyes, a quiet storm swirling behind their calm. "I've been trying to figure this out," I said finally, my voice low. She didn't turn to look at me. "I know," she whispered. The night air filled the space between our words, cool and restless. "I can't stop thinking about you," I admitted. "But I keep asking myself the same thing over and over." Her hands were resting on the railing. I could see the way her fingers tightened slightly, like she already knew what was coming. I drew in a slow breath. "Is this a bad idea?" The words slipped out softly. No accusations. No defenses. Just raw, quiet truth. She stayed still for a long moment. So long I began to wonder if she would answer at all. Then she turned, slowly, deliberately, until her eyes found mine. There was no hesitation in the way she looked at me. Just a soft, unspoken ache. She stepped closer, her hand rising almost without thought. Her fingers brushed against my chest, light, almost trembling, and then rested there, feeling the quiet beat beneath my ribs. "If it is," she said softly, her voice steady even as it wavered at the edges, "then why does it feel so right?" The city seemed to fall away around us. The fog. The cold. The distant hum of traffic. It all faded beneath the weight of her words. Her hand stayed over my heart, warm against the chill. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was standing at the edge of something uncertain. I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I didn't pull her closer. I didn't have to. The silence that followed was louder than any confession, and in it, everything was said. The world might still have its questions. But in that moment, neither of us cared for answers. After that night on the balcony, something shifted between us. Not in loud, dramatic ways. But in the quiet, steady kind of way that feels like exhaling after holding your breath too long. We stopped pretending. There were no speeches, no sudden labels, no promises rushed into the air. But the way she looked at me now carried no hesitation. The way I reached for her hand no longer trembled with guilt. Our moments grew softer. Clearer. We began meeting without excuses. Early mornings at the cafe before work, lingering walks that stretched well past sunset. Sometimes we didn't talk much, sometimes we just sat, side by side, listening to the world move around us. It felt easy. Natural. Like it had been waiting for us to stop fighting it. One afternoon, we ended up at a small park not far from her apartment. The trees swayed in a light wind, scattering golden leaves across the grass. She sat on a bench, legs crossed gracefully, watching a little boy chase a paper plane. Her scarf was wrapped loosely around her neck, hair falling gently over her shoulders. I sat down next to her, close enough that my shoulder brushed hers. She didn't pull away. She tilted her head slightly, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Do you ever think about how everything started with nothing special? Every day, I said quietly. She laughed softly, not a big, bright laugh, but the kind that sounds like it belongs to two people who already understand the unspoken parts of each other. The wind picked up a little, and without thinking, I reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My fingertips brushed her skin, warm, smooth, achingly familiar now. She didn't flinch, didn't freeze. Her eyes softened. You make it look easy, she whispered. It's not, I admitted, my voice lower now, quieter. But it feels right. Her hand found mine then, gently at first, fingers sliding between mine like she'd been waiting to do it for a long time. There was no hesitation this time. Just warmth. Steadiness. People passed by, caught up in their own lives, but the world around us blurred at the edges. It wasn't that everything was perfect. It wasn't. We both knew there were still questions, still looks from the outside world that could hurt if we let them. But sitting there, holding her hand, none of it mattered enough to make us turn away. She turned toward me fully then, her eyes meeting mine with quiet certainty. I'm tired of being scared, she said softly. Her thumb brushed over my knuckles. The simple motion sent a ripple of warmth through me. I exhaled slowly, my forehead resting against hers for a brief, quiet moment. Then let's stop being scared. No one else heard it. But in that whisper, a choice was made. Not to defy the world. Not to fight anyone. Just to hold on. And in the silence that followed, it felt less like falling and more like landing exactly where we were meant to be. Time didn't speed up after that night. It didn't explode into some whirlwind of passion or chaos. It just flowed. Steady. Real. We began living in the quiet in-between spaces. The moments no one writes songs about, like the soft rustle of a page turning while she reads beside me, or the sound of water boiling in the kitchen while I make coffee. Our love wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The world still looked at us sometimes. People talked. Whispers followed like faint shadows we learned not to chase. But we stopped caring about proving anything. We didn't owe anyone a story that made sense to them. On weekends, we'd meet at the same small park. The one with the old benches, the fading paint, and the way the sun always seemed to linger just a little longer in the afternoons. She'd bring a book. I'd bring coffee. And in between words and sips, we built a life that no one saw coming. It wasn't perfect, love never is. There were still days when doubts pressed at the edges, like unwanted guests trying to get in. But instead of running from them, we started facing them together. No dramatic speeches, no tears soaked into pillows. Just quiet honesty. A touch. A glance. A whisper, I'm here. One evening, the city was painted in shades of fading gold, the sky stretched wide and gentle. We walked along the narrow path lined with trees shedding their last autumn leaves. She wore her favorite coat, the one with the loose buttons, and her hair was tied loosely, strands escaping to frame her face. I walked beside her, not needing to reach for her hand anymore. Because now, it reached for mine first. She suddenly stopped. I turned to face her, and she just looked at me with that calm, steady gaze that used to make me nervous. Now, it felt like home. You know, she said softly, her breath forming a small cloud in the cool air, it doesn't scare me anymore. What doesn't? This. Us. How real it is. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She stepped closer, close enough that I could hear her heartbeat. Close enough that the world felt far away. There was no grand kiss. No sweeping music. Just a forehead resting against mine, her hand pressed gently over my chest. A quiet promise, louder than any vow. Love doesn't always have to be wild to be strong. Sometimes it's the stillness. The way two souls can sit in silence and still say everything. As the last leaf drifted down around us, I realized something I'd been trying to deny since the beginning: this wasn't a mistake, and it never had been. We had stopped asking if it was wrong. We had started living like it was right. And in that small, ordinary corner of the world, that was more than enough. If you felt something in this moment, like it reached a quiet corner of your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Your support helps me bring more slow burn love to life.